Good afternoon and welcome to Kitty Talks. We share inspirational life stories that empower you to create yours. And today I have with me Dr. Manjir Samanta Laughton. Good morning. Good afternoon even. How are you?
Hi, good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you that don't know, Dr. Manjir is a former GP turned author and international speaker. She's written 2 books, Punk Science and the Genius Groove, and she speaks all over the world. So welcome, Manjir.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, well, I'm very excited because we were just chatting before and you have got an amazing transformational journey that I'm very chuffed that you are going to share with our audience. But I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're doing in the world at the moment.
Well, it sounds like I've got a very long name, which I have, but you can call me Manjir. I used to be a GP, medical GP in the UK, come from a very medical family. And around 18 years old, when I first started in medical school, I had a spiritual awakening very suddenly and pretty much out of the blue. And that changed my whole life. I went from being a skeptic to, I wouldn't say a believer, but a knower, because a believer there's a little bit of separation from that knowledge, but it was inner knowing that was switched on in me. And, but, science was my first love. So I kind of went, how can I explain this in terms of science? And I started to see things on the cutting edge of physics, such as variable speed of light theory, string theory, quantum physics. And I thought, you know what? If we put this together in easy language, people can understand spiritual concepts, esoteric concepts, things like that much more easily, but the language needs to be easy, needs to be contemporary. So a lot of people will know me as the author of Punk Science, which has become an Amazon bestseller on both sides of the pond, actually. So UK and USA, it's been number 1 in the Spirit and Religion charts. And the second book, The Genius Groove, which tells more about my own personal journey. And I'm also known for something called the black hole principle, which is not something I intended to find. But basically, it's a new theory of the universe, which has made lots of predictions since it was, since I first published in 2003. And those predictions have been borne out by NASA and various other space telescopes and things like that. As just things like water being found on other planets such as Mars, all being predicted by this theory. So it's a very powerful scientific theory. And what I do also is explain to people how these universal principles are not just about black holes in space, and how they can relate to you, your emotions, your day-to-day, how you can actually utilize this black hole science in your daily life and to create more freedom in your life and move you into a new way of being, really.
Wow, we definitely have to come back to that. That sounds really interesting. I'd love also to hear a bit more. You said that you had a spiritual awakening at 18. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, it was unexpected. You know how when you join the university, you get courted by clubs and things who want you to sign up.
Freshers Week.
Freshers Week, yeah. And so I was at Freshers Week of the University of London. So I was studying at what was then called the Royal Free Medical School in Hampstead in London. And my friends and I went down to the main student union to go to the Freshers Week there. And a friend of mine just signed me up for a yoga class. And I'd never done yoga before. I'd done Tai Chi. And in the end, she dropped out of this yoga class, and it was a free yoga class. So I went by myself. And within a few minutes, I had this feeling. Bear in mind, I was a skeptic.
Yeah.
I had set this up from before my birth. And my logical mind was going, no, you can't have done that. But I just knew I was in the right place at the right time. Overwhelming feeling. And on the chart, there was a chart with chakras on it. And I just went, I know those. And I am from a Hindu background, but my parents being both doctors, they're not people who are heavily into what we call
Eastern philosophy.
They've got their own spirituality, absolutely. I can't put that, say that they're not totally into it. But they didn't bring me aside and tell me about chakras or meditation or anything. So I just had this kind of knowing. I go, this from the past life in India.
Oh, wow.
And so this is 18, complete skeptic, and suddenly I'm starting to tune into past lives. And we went through this sort of mantras, I suppose. And with this lady on a video, if anybody is familiar, this is a group called Sahaja Yoga. So I went through this, and then I just I felt my consciousness completely unite with everything. I mean, with the consciousness in what is known as a Kundalini awakening. So that's when the coiled energy at the bottom of your spine actually rises through your spine and comes out through your crown chakra. Now I know that was effectively a black hole event, which we can talk about a written on that too. But this was the moment that I just woke up, and it was just, life has totally been different ever since that time.
Wow, fantastic. And is it fair to say then that almost was like an activator for you, that experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fascinating. And tell us a little bit more, because obviously that was 18. Tell us a little bit more about your journey from 18 to where you are today.
Oh, well, I was in med school, so, suddenly I've got this very different world opening up. But I'm still got the day job, as it were, doing the whole thing of dissecting bodies and, learning about how to take blood and, all of those things that a med student does, lots of exams. Any time that I could, I was learning more on my spiritual journey, any funds that I could put into, obviously I was a student in London at the time, which is not very solvent. There was a long journey, and at the same time I was going through a lot of emotional stuff in terms that I was living with my sister in a flat in London, and things became very, very difficult. And there were even death threats coming from her and things like that, and it just got very, very heated. And in the middle of all that, I met the man who was going to be my future husband, and there was so much spiritual energy about this happening. And so, even though I was 21, still in medical school, we actually did get married. And part of it, now I can look back, and part of it was to get away from the situation with my sister. But part of it was I really did find a soulmate of mine, absolutely strong soulmate. And we got married, and that sort of stabilized my life for a while, so much so that I grew enormously spiritually. So unfortunately, we grew apart because of that. And so I trained as a bioenergy healer at the same time that I was training as a GP. So in early 2002, I found myself growing apart from my husband, qualified GP, a qualified bioenergy healer.
Quite different.
So I had a double life, and I was rushing back from doing visits in the surgery and coming back and seeing clients and sort of tuning into their past lives and their multidimensional selves and shape-shifting. And, it was definitely a double life, and keeping that whole secret. And I also started to lecture on all the science, and I think I started lecturing as early. I think the first talk that I did on this was 1999. So that is coming up to almost 20 years now. So yes, I was this other lecturing life was starting. So yeah, it all came crashing down when I realised over some period of time that myself and my husband needed to divorce. It was not a healthy situation. And so when we eventually did, unfortunately, he decided to talk about my spirituality to the medical authorities. And I was, supporting myself working as a GP. And I ended up going through a medical investigation, an investigation with the medical authorities in the UK. And it was devastating. I lost overnight because he convinced my parents as well, who were both doctors, that there was something wrong with me. I was having all these visions and seeing angels and that sort of thing.
Wow.
That obviously they're going to think it, as doctors, they think it's a psychiatric breakdown. And so I ended up going through this investigation, was not allowed to work. As a result, I lost the place that I was living in, and I went through a very difficult time. But at the same time, knowing that this was the right thing to happen, when I moved back into my own house with my ex-husband, who was, we were still married, but we were estranged, effectively, who then, was very sorry because it had gone too far. And basically we lived estranged for 4 years. And I started this new life. I mean, literally one door closed. My ex-husband cut off my phone, so it was in his name, so he cut off my phone. And so I couldn't have my phone on in surgery, and I would sort of have to switch it off. So I got back to look at who had called me, and literally one number was from the GP surgery, because my parents had come down to my doctor, the doctor who was like in charge of my health, the GP, who ironically I'd been working alongside because that's the practice where I trained. So, the same doctors who I worked alongside just a few months before were now looking at me as if I had had a psychotic breakdown. So basically, there was a message from a doctor saying, we're coming over, she's coming over with a psychiatrist. I knew what that meant. They were looking to section me. And so there was one day when, I got that message, and then the psychiatrist came over, they signed me off sick, they said I couldn't work, and that started the whole general medical council procedure. And then the other message was from a woman who wanted to introduce me to someone who it ended up starting my speaking career. And I've been really speaking around the world ever since. I mean, talk about one door shutting.
Yeah.
It was so stark. And, so I do want to emphasize, though, I was not struck off. A lot of people say, oh, you were struck off the register. I actually took myself off because I got the message from the universe that this is not what I was meant to do.
Well, that's a pretty drastic shift, isn't it? They were really shifting you out of that environment.
Yeah. I was not in integrity. I was living a lie. On one hand, I was going to be a GP, which is very fear-based. Medicine is fear-based because what you're saying is you are sick. There's something wrong with you. I'm judging what has happened to you. When in reality, what was happening in my spirituality was coming out of judgment, going, if you are sick, it's because of the wisdom of your soul.
Mm.
This is not something that is out of perfection. This is not something to be judged. This is the wisdom of your soul starting to manifest. And I started to do GP surgeries where I was just smiling and almost going, great, you manifested this. This is you shifting. And I almost was saying, you can't say stuff like that. You got to pretend to be fearful, pretend to be fearful.
Imagine it's a bit diverse. Can you go in to see your GP and they're like, Brilliant, you're ill. Your body's trying to tell you something. Well done.
It's like, well done, you manifested a sore throat, you know. So, because of course the sore throat is things coming out, you know, you express
expression.
So yeah, I mean the paradigms are not fitting, obviously. So I did know this is, of course, it was devastating. And you know, I did spend a lot of time with depression, and I also knew that I had to make peace with my ex-husband because I hated him at that point.
Yeah, of course.
And that when you hate someone that much, that means there's a lot of work to do.
That hate is just, you know, it's affecting you, isn't it? It's like poison in your body.
Exactly. So, I mean, I knew that I could not grow until I made peace with my ex-husband. And made peace with my family as well, and got back to that place of love. And John Demartini's work, He Was in the Secret, was just I'd seen him live in New Mexico just before all this stuff happened. And he confirmed a lot of stuff for me about quantum physics and how it all works. But reading his book, you know, realizing that, of course, these souls of my parents and my ex-husband, they'd taken this on. You know, even though it was going to get to a point where I did walk away from my ex, and you know, so he was going to suffer the pain of that, because at the end of the day, he did actually love me, you know, and so he was going to suffer the pain of me leaving him in order to play this part in my life. So to realize that everybody's playing their part perfectly.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Do you believe that these are almost contracts that we have kind of agreed to before we come in, and actually once your contracts are complete, then you kind of move on? And
yeah, I think, and when you get to the point where I got to the point where I realized the sacrifice that he had made to play that contract as well, you know, which is all part of the perfection, but to balance out and see the level of the soul contract, and it just opened up, and from that point I could start healing. It's taken years. It's been a doozy, you know. And in that time, of course, I wrote the book. Suddenly, my time was freed up, and you know, my ex-husband was taking care of the mortgage and things like that. His salary, he became a pharmaceutical doctor, just started to go up and up. And so I was supported, but, you know, doing my new life, writing punk science, and going, you know, my little Nissan Micra. I used to, you know, plan ahead how much fuel I needed, and, you know, living very much hand to mouth to, you know, get to all of these places. And, you know, and things gradually went from there. And after 4 years, I got rejected by a lot of publishers. But I got a publishing contract after the 4 years when the book was ready, not when my ego self wanted it to happen.
Oh, yeah, how interesting, yeah. So you've got a book contract, and then obviously it sounds, so would you kind of say that you've now, the way you live life is totally different? Like you've gone from living, you know, kind of structured, formal, you know, training as a GP to now, like, as we say, listening to the whispers of your soul and following what feels right to you?
Yeah, it's. I think a lot of women as well. I find, you know, they are being in control and sort of they're the organisers of the house a lot of the time.
Yeah,
and it's hard to switch off that sort of you know, getting everything lined up and, you know, sorting everything. And it's hard to sort of break that pattern and start to listen to the higher self and do that surrender. You know, obviously I was very much in that pattern. That's why I had to have such a doozy to get me out of, you know, and I still find it difficult, this sort of surrender and see what happens. But, you know, I've had so much success of being on, you know, national TV, international TV, really, with Richard Dawkins, for example. Channel 4 have called me up, and, you know, all sorts of things have happened to me. And, you know, most of that is without any PR, nothing like that has happened. It just started to roll and roll and roll, and things would just come towards me. There's very few times where I've had to go out and try and get some contacts or anything. People have just come towards me. And I think that's part of the surrender. When you do get onto your true path, it will just start to open up. And amazingly, even though I haven't, had a formal job for so long, the finances, I think that's a big thing people worry about. The finance has been fine for me as well. I mean, it hasn't always been brilliant, but that has been taken care of as well. So it's quite interesting, the things that people talk about, the abundance that's really there that you tap into once you get onto the true path and you start doing what your soul calling really is about. It is true. You start to be looked after.
The vision for Kitty Talks is to inspire a generation of change makers to follow their passion and purpose and make a difference on the planet. And so, interviewing people such as yourself who are doing exactly that is to inspire others to take that leap and to actually have the courage to live a different way. So would you have any advice for people listening who maybe, like yourself, are in a job that doesn't nourish or satisfy them? What advice would you have for them about how they can transition out of that? So they don't necessarily have to have this big wake-up call, because if we can avoid those, we should try to.
I think one thing that is important as well is don't judge yourself. Because I think people go, well, I'm not happy at my job. I really should be looking to be out of this. I should be living my dreams. If there's something that is holding you back, it's holding you back for a reason. So don't judge it, because the timing has to be right. And that timing might not be something that you're aware of. There may be even someone at work that you have a sole contract with that hasn't quite finished. There may be some things at multidimensional levels that you're not aware of. So don't beat yourself up. Just do what is right for you at that time. And if you don't feel that it's quite right for you to leave your job, don't beat yourself up about it, because when the timing is right, it'll be clear. So that's one of the things. And people just say to you, go for it, but it can induce a lot of guilt.
Yes.
So, not judging yourself is a big one.
Absolutely. And like you said, kind of starting to learn to trust your inner knowing. And like you said, if it doesn't quite feel right, then maybe there is a reason for that. Absolutely. Mm. Thank you so much for listening to Kitty Talks. Be sure to head over to our kittytalks.com website and become a member of our exclusive club, and you'll get free interviews and access to our private Facebook group, exclusive webinars and secret success interviews. See you there.